In the shadows of a quiet town, a chilling mystery unraveled when nurse Emily Carson vanished without a trace. At the center stood psychiatrist Dr. Jonathan Barry, once admired, now haunted by whispers of guilt. The townspeople, neighbors like Margaret Hayes, patients like Clarke, and co-workers like Laura Bennett, fed the fire with gossip, each rumor tightening the noose around his reputation. When a hidden room of files and journals was discovered, suspicion became obsession. Yet as detectives unearthed bones near the river, the truth blurred. Was Dr. Barry a monster, or merely a victim of rumor, innuendo, and fear? The town rested quietly along the Canadian prairie, a place where the horizon stretched wide and gossip moved faster than the trains that rolled through its station. Everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least believed they did. It was the kind of community where a new haircut sparked conversation, where the smallest scandal could ripple through coffee shops, church groups, and grocery store aisles in a matter of hours. People trusted routine, trusted appearances, and most of all trusted the idea that their neighbors were who they claimed to be. Yet that trust began to falter. The night a nurse disappeared without a trace. She was well-liked, a familiar face at the local hospital, known for her kindness and long hours caring for patients. After finishing a late-night shift, she walked toward her car in the dimly lit parking lot. Security cameras showed her reaching the vehicle, opening the door, and then the footage cut off. By morning, her car was still there, locked from the outside, with her purse resting on the passenger seat. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of where she might have gone. At first, people assumed she had taken off suddenly, perhaps to escape stress or to be with someone in secret. But as the days passed, that explanation lost credibility. She had left behind her wallet, her phone, and her beloved dog, things she would never abandon willingly. What began as quiet worry soon transformed into a storm of speculation. In a town that thrived on stories, every detail became twisted into rumor. Some whispered that she had been having an affair with a married man. Others claimed she had debts that drove her to run. A few even said she had enemies at the hospital who wanted her gone. With each retelling, the story changed. Details blurred, and truths became indistinguishable from invention. The police urged patience, insisting they were following every lead. But the community wanted answers faster than facts could provide. The strange part was how quickly suspicion began to fall on those who seemed least likely. Friends who once trusted one another began to exchange nervous glances, wondering who might be hiding something. The nurse's absence was no longer just a mystery. It became a mirror reflecting the town's deepest insecurities. If someone could vanish so easily, then safety was only an illusion. People began locking their doors, avoiding walks after dark, and looking twice at familiar faces they once greeted without hesitation. As weeks passed, the case grew colder, but the gossip grew louder. Each person who told the story added a twist of their own, building layers upon layers of rumor until the missing woman's life resembled a collection of secrets rather than the reality she had lived. The truth was slipping further away with each whispered retelling, and though no one knew it yet, this web of gossip was about to trap someone else in its threads. In a place where stories carried more weight than facts, it was only a matter of time before suspicion fell on the wrong person. Dr. Barry had always been a man of order, known for his professionalism and calm demeanor inside the walls of his office. Patients described him as insightful, a psychiatrist who listened without judgment and offered practical guidance. He lived alone in a stately house near the center of town, a property inherited from his family. With gardens so neatly maintained, they seemed untouched by time. To those who crossed his path casually, he was polite but reserved, someone who carried himself with quiet dignity. Yet in a town where everyone talked, his preference for privacy became a subject of suspicion long before the nurse disappeared. People whispered about his solitary lifestyle, about why he never married, about what he might be hiding behind the closed curtains of his home. None of it mattered until the day her case pushed him from background figure to potential suspect. The connection was small but enough to spark curiosity. The missing nurse had once been one of his patients. In reality, their sessions had been brief and professional. But the discovery fueled speculation that something more sinister tied them together. It didn't take much for the town to turn that fact into a story of forbidden closeness, of hidden motives and secret meetings. Each conversation about the case seemed to circle back to him, and with each retelling, the details grew darker. Though police had no evidence linking him to the disappearance, the community's gossip became louder than the investigation itself. At the hospital, whispers spread through break rooms and corridors. Staff members who had once admired the doctor now eyed him warily, repeating theories they had overheard in coffee shops. A nurse claimed she had seen him lingering in the parking lot weeks before the disappearance, though she couldn't be certain. Another swore she had overheard the missing woman speaking about him in hushed tones, though no one could confirm it. These fragments of memory, twisted by rumor, became fuel for suspicion. Gossip painted him as a man who had everything to lose, and therefore everything to hide. Dr. Barry's response to the attention only deepened the mistrust. Instead of addressing the speculation, he withdrew further. He stopped attending community events, stopped lingering in public spaces, and was seen only moving quickly from his house to his office. To him, silence was dignity, but to the people watching, silence was guilt. They filled in the blanks with their own ideas, convinced that his calmness was not professionalism, but concealment. He became the perfect target, educated, private, and impossible to fully understand. By the time detectives interviewed him formally, much of the town had already made up its mind. He was cooperative, answering their questions carefully, but his measured tone was interpreted as cold. He denied knowing anything beyond the professional relationship he had once had with the missing nurse. But every word was scrutinized, every pause exaggerated by rumor into evidence. When he was released without charge, townspeople saw it not as proof of innocence, but as a failure of the system. For them, the story had already been written, and he was at the center of it. The nurse's disappearance was no longer just a tragedy. It had become a narrative of gossip, rumor, and innuendo, and Dr. Barry was cast as the lead whether he wanted the role or not. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan. As the investigation dragged on with no breakthroughs, the vacuum left by unanswered questions was quickly filled with the stories people told each other. The missing nurse became less a person and more a symbol of speculation. And Dr. Barry's name was tied to her in ways that grew harder to untangle. Each week brought a new rumor, and though none were backed by evidence, they spread like wildfire through the town. Someone swore they had seen him driving out of town late at night, his headlights cutting through the fog on the river road. Another claimed his office lights never went dark, flickering well past midnight as if he was hiding something inside. A clerk at the grocery store insisted he purchased bleach in bulk, though no record confirmed it. Each story, unverified and often conflicting, piled onto the last until suspicion felt like fact. The police found themselves inundated with anonymous tips. Many of them were vague, repeating the same gossip heard at the bakery or whispered across fences. Yet what unsettled investigators most was the eerie consistency in some of the claims. Time and again, people mentioned seeing the doctor near the river, a place that was already being searched for signs of the nurse. Nothing solid was uncovered there, but the repeated accounts suggested that the gossip might be circling something close to the truth. Still, without physical evidence, the trail led nowhere. Every new search ended the same. Muddy footprints that went nowhere, discarded bottles with no fingerprints, patches of earth disturbed by animals rather than men. For the townspeople, the lack of progress only strengthened their beliefs. Silence from the authorities made the rumors sound more convincing. If he wasn't guilty, they reasoned, why hasn't anyone else been accused? Conversations in diners and gas stations turned into unofficial trials, where Dr. Barry's reputation was dismantled piece by piece. To some, he was no longer the helpful psychiatrist, but a calculating predator who had hidden in plain sight. To others, he was a recluse whose odd habits were finally catching up with him. The truth mattered less than the story itself, and the story was too compelling to ignore. Even those who had once defended him began to waver. Patients who had trusted him with their secrets questioned whether those confidences were safe. Parents warned their children to avoid his street. The same neighbors who once waved politely now crossed to the other side of the road when he appeared. The gossip had reshaped reality until it no longer mattered if he was guilty. What mattered was that the community believed he was. His very presence became evidence, his privacy a crime. For Dr. Barry, the isolation grew unbearable. The more he withdrew, the more his silence fueled the town's certainty. Every locked curtain, every empty garden chair, every shadow in his window was interpreted as proof. The case of the missing nurse was stalling in official records, but in the court of rumor it was moving quickly toward conviction. Gossip had become stronger than evidence, and innuendo had become the town's chosen truth. What no one realized was that while they obsessed over the doctor, the real story was preparing to twist in a way none of them expected. The investigation turned sharply when yet another anonymous call came into the police station. The voice on the line claimed that Dr. Barry was hiding something behind his office walls, something that could explain the nurse's disappearance. The lead sounded like countless others, vague and dramatic, but it was enough for investigators to request a search warrant. On a rainy morning, officers descended on the property, and what they found changed the course of the case. In the back of the office, behind a heavy bookcase that seemed fixed to the wall, they discovered a narrow doorway. Beyond it was a hidden room, a cramped space that smelled of dust and secrecy, as if it had not been disturbed in years. The room was filled with rows of old patient files, far more than the hospital kept on record. Each file was detailed, written in Dr. Barry's careful hand, chronicling private struggles, fears, and confessions. On one wall hung shelves stacked with audio recordings, labeled by name and date. It was not unusual for doctors to keep notes, but the obsessive precision and sheer volume suggested something deeper. In the center of the room sat a desk, its surface covered in journals. Most were orderly, but a few stood out. Their pages were erratic, filled with drawings, fragmented thoughts, and cryptic notes about patients. One file belonged to the missing nurse. Unlike the others, it was thick with entries, some of which hinted at unease. According to the notes, she had expressed a fear of being followed, of someone watching her outside of work. The final entry was chillingly abrupt, written just days before her disappearance. It ended with a half-finished sentence that investigators could not ignore. This discovery was enough to place Dr. Barry back in the spotlight. No longer just the subject of gossip, but now linked to physical evidence, however circumstantial. The town reacted swiftly. News of the hidden room spread even before official statements were released. To the public, it was confirmation of everything they had whispered about for weeks. The idea that a respected doctor had concealed such a space behind his office fueled imaginations and solidified suspicions. The gossip was no longer just rumor. It now had a foundation, in fact, however unstable that foundation might have been. To many, it proved he was not only hiding information, but also hiding something far darker. Yet investigators hesitated. While the files and journals painted an unsettling picture, none of it tied directly to the crime. There were no signs of violence in the room, no evidence linking the nurse's disappearance to Dr. Barry beyond his obsessive record-keeping. The discoveries raised more questions than answers. Was he documenting patients for his own research? Was it a form of control? Or was it a reflection of something disturbed within him? Without proof, the case remained unresolved, though the direction of suspicion had been cemented. For Dr. Barry, the hidden room was a disaster. Whether or not it was intended for harm, its existence destroyed any shred of trust left in the community. To the townspeople, it was not the careful work of a meticulous man, but the lair of someone who had long been living a double life. With every new rumor layered over the truth, the line between fact and innuendo blurred completely. The discovery had not solved the mystery. It had only deepened it, leaving both the police and the town more unsettled than before. The discovery of the hidden room seemed like the final piece of the puzzle, yet it only made the case more tangled. Investigators searched the space inch by inch, hoping to find physical evidence that would connect Dr. Barry to the nurse's disappearance. What they found instead was confusion. Among the boxes of recordings and journals were files that belonged to people who had left town years ago, some who had moved away, others who had died of natural causes. There were no clear connections between them, no consistent pattern beyond the doctor's compulsive need to record. If he had committed a crime, nothing in that room proved it. What it did prove was that he lived a life consumed by secrets. A man who trusted his own archives more than the memories of those around him. The townspeople, however, didn't need more proof. To them, the hidden room was all the evidence they required. The gossip reached a fever pitch, transforming from speculation into certainty. Dr. Barry was guilty in the eyes of the community, and no official statement could convince them otherwise. Parents pulled their children from his care, patients canceled appointments, and neighbors avoided walking down his street. His once carefully managed reputation was ruined, not by the courts, but by whispers and rumors that had gained the weight of truth. The town had turned him into a villain, and nothing he did could change that. Just when it seemed the case was nearing its conclusion, a hiker stumbled upon bones buried near the riverbank. At first, authorities believed they had finally found the missing nurse. The news sent a wave of grim satisfaction through the town, as if the final piece of gossip had been confirmed. But forensic testing delivered an unexpected twist. The remains were not hers. They belonged to someone else, a victim who had disappeared years before she ever went missing. This revelation cracked the story wide open again, raising more questions than answers. If the bones weren't hers, where was she? And was it possible that another predator, separate from Dr. Barry, had been hiding in their midst all along? The unanswered questions unsettled everyone. The police could not prove Dr. Barry was involved in the nurse's disappearance, and yet the discovery of the hidden room and the strange journals kept suspicion alive. He was never charged with a crime, but his life in the town was effectively over. With his reputation destroyed, he quietly packed his belongings and left, disappearing just as mysteriously as the woman whose absence had sparked everything. The community was left with a hollow victory. They had pushed out the man they believed guilty, but they still had no closure, no justice, and no truth. Years later, the case remains unsolved, kept alive only through rumor and innuendo. The missing nurse was never found, and the hidden room became a legend retold in hushed tones. Dr. Barry's name still drifts through conversations, half warning, half myth. A story too tangled to ever be set straight. In the end, the truth was never uncovered, and the gossip that once seemed like idle chatter became the only version of the story the town ever had. It was a reminder that sometimes, in the absence of facts, rumor itself becomes the final verdict. In the end, the disappearance of Emily Carson remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries. The suspicion around Dr. Jonathan Barry, the hidden room of files, and the bones discovered near the river left more questions than answers. What began as whispers of gossip turned into a storm of innuendo that destroyed reputations but never uncovered the truth. Was Barry a criminal hiding in plain sight, or a victim of rumor and fear? The line between fact and fiction blurred so completely that the real story may never be known. What remains is silence, and a chilling reminder that sometimes rumor becomes the final verdict. If this mystery kept you on the edge, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this video to spread the word. Your support helps uncover the darkest secrets still hidden in plain sight.